Well, thanks, Dennison. It was awesome to meet Dennison many, many years ago and to be there at their camp and to visit them. And absolute honor to be with all of you guys here today to take a look at creating an annual fundraising plan for your camp or conference center. It's a great, straightforward topic, and it's something that is greatly needed, but is oftentimes overlooked, not only in our camping ministries, but also in most nonprofits. A few items before we start. I am going to share with Dennison the handout, the kit that we'll be going through today, the 7 steps after our training today. We'll be putting that in the chat at the end. Also, I will share the PowerPoint as soon as this is over as well. So you'll have all my notes, you'll have everything at the end of this. So just follow along today through the 7 steps, and I think we'll get through it pretty easily. Again, I do serve as the fundraising coach for Christian Camp and Conference Association through Mission Increase out of Portland, Oregon. We work in collaboration with Mission Increase to provide training, coaching, and consulting in biblically based fundraising and development for all 3CA members across the country. I've been in camping, as Dennis said, for over 20 years. Most of my time was spent in programming, but also my last 8 years, I was in fundraising and development and saw God do some amazing, crazy. In fact, we were sharing some of these stories before we jumped onto these crazy God stories that he did while we were there at New Life Ranch. But again, honored to be in this role. I'm often asked, what is my favorite role? What has been my favorite role at camp? And it's not that I nerd out on this stuff of fundraising, but I would say that fundraising has been my most incredible and fun role in camp. And it might be odd, but I saw God do some amazing things. I've seen ministry happen like no other in my time in fundraising and development. And sometimes that's not what we always think of as fundraising as ministry, but it absolutely is ministry. I do want to start, Dennison talked about my family. Here we are on a hike recently. My wife, Kristen, and I have been married now 21 years. I need to change my bio. 21 years. And we did meet at New Life Ranch. Some call it New Wife Ranch, but that's just part of being in camping, right? Our daughter here, Catherine or Kate, she's 18. She's a student at the University of Arkansas. Cooper, he's in high school. He's 16. He basically works on his car all the time. And then Riley is 9 and into everything right now. And I share about my family for this reason today. Even though that we are a family unit, each one of us are very unique. And I know that's probably true of all you and your families as well. We're different in our own way. We enjoy different things, but we're also alike in a lot of ways, but not so much in other ways. It's also very true of my immediate family, and it's also true of my wife's immediate family. We're very different, especially when it comes to trips or vacation, right? And so one of our families, and I'm not going to say which one is which, but one of our families goes in with a very firm plan, action. This is what we're going to do. We directly state what we're going to do. We plan well. We get a lot accomplished, right? The other family, who again will remain anonymous, not so much, right? Therefore, we sit around a lot. We talk about things that we could do a lot, but we get very little accomplished. And these differences can absolutely cause some strife in our family vacations. So how does this all relate to fundraising plan? Well, how do you and your camp or conference center plan? Does everybody know what to do and what they are being asked to do? Do you talk about a lot of stuff, or do you actually get a lot of stuff accomplished? Is there some strife or maybe some conflict that could easily be resolved by a plan? Well, let's kind of see where you're at. Just some check-in questions. Just think about these questions as we start today. Great questions to think about. Number one, how would you describe your approach to a fundraising planning? Maybe you're sitting here going, we have no approach whatsoever. Some of you might say, well, we just go off our budget. Others of you might say, well, it's just kind of by the seat of our pants. When we need a project done or money raised, we go do that. Many of us might just close our eyes and maybe swing at it as best we can. Many of you probably plan really well yearly, and you follow that plan, and that's great. So some of you may do something different altogether. Also, if you have a plan, how often and how Do you engage with that plan throughout the year? Maybe you look at it monthly as a team of staff at your camp. Maybe look at it quarterly, maybe biannually. Maybe you never look at it again after creating it. And again, some of you are probably on the call saying, what plan are you talking about, right? If you don't have a plan, I want to ask you to think about what's keeping you from doing it. What is actually keeping you from creating a fundraising plan? And this could be time. We all are busy, and we know that, especially if you have a small staff, or maybe you're the only one at your camp. Maybe you don't know where to start, and hopefully we'll help you with that today. Maybe you don't know if a fundraising plan will actually make a difference, or that if it's actually worth it. And maybe COVID has just diminished your confidence in planning anything altogether, right? It's been crazy. Also, I want you to think about, what are you hoping to learn from today? How do you think a fundraising plan would change the camp or conference center? And those are all great questions, but there's one more question that I really want us to start with, and I want us to think about, because I think this is where many of us as ministry leaders sometimes get stuck. So who is in charge of writing and developing your fundraising plan? I want to say this. Whether you're the director of development, the executive director, a development staff person, a board member, or in some other role related to fundraising, you are a leader who can write a fundraising plan. Meaning you can't sit on the sidelines and say, well, if just my board would get the fundraising plan written, or if just my director would get the fundraising plan written, I could implement it. Right at the end of last year, our staff at Mission Increase read Clay Scroggins' book, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. And he states that leaders who bring a trust-fueled, hope-filled, forward-thinking attitude every day can change any team dynamic. Both the fundraising plan itself and the process for creating that plan could be transformative for your organization. Creating a fundraising plan is an act of leadership that can shape the organization and your culture. So no matter your role at camp, you can do this. You can create an incredible fundraising plan that can transform your ministry. Now, I always like to start my trainings and my workshops with the end in mind, and that's something we talked about at camp a lot. But what do I want for you today? Well, I want you to have the ability to look back. I want you to have the ability to look up, and I want you to be able to see a way forward. I want you to have a fundraising plan that you can trust, and a fundraising plan that you can lean on. Also, one idea I want to leave with you today is, number one, your budget is not your fundraising plan, but your budget and your fundraising plan should work together. I'm often asked, so which one do you plan first, the budget or your fundraising plan? And I would advise you to honestly plan them together. See, a budget is a basic spreadsheet solution. A budget tells us where you're going to be spending your money. A budget communicates need and resulting impact. Your budget also allows you to make stronger asks of donors, because it informs and helps you share direct impact that the champion's dollars are going to make. But if all you have is a budget, you're more likely to lean towards the scarcity mindset. A fundraising plan, I want to share with you, is a generosity map. It guides the way you invite your champions to generously join you in the cause. A fundraising plan also tells you how you'll be raising the money you plan to spend in your budget. And when you live out of a generosity-based fundraising plan, you are more likely to see and experience an abundant mindset. So when you marry your fundraising plan with your budget, it gives you the answers for the question of, what are you going to do with my money if I give it to you? The giving provided by your champions, the fundraising plan, combined with your stewardship of those resources, your budget, works together to give you the ability to create kingdom impact. One of the things that I think is very helpful in starting and looking at a fundraising plan is we need to erase all of our assumptions, especially now, after or in the middle of a pandemic, hopefully ending a pandemic, right? Some of those assumptions may be this. A fundraising plan is always last year's budget plus 10% or 15%. Like we always have to be growing. Another assumption might be that nobody's giving during a pandemic. Nobody's going to give during COVID. COVID has halted all donations, which I'll tell you right now is absolutely false. We've seen more giving than ever during COVID. Well, also, assumption might be a decrease in my income may mean a decrease in my impact. And we have to replace all of those assumptions with truth and really great questions. The truths start with this: God is abundant, God is good, God is generous. Also, generous people are still looking for ways to give even during COVID. Also, the truth of even if you have a decrease in your income, it does not mean you cannot have impact. And then there's some really great questions with these truths in mind. Number one, is there anything that we need to change? And that's always something really great to ask when we start putting together our budget, we start putting together our fundraising plan. Anything we need to change, anything we need to stop doing, is there anything we need to do different? And what do we need to start doing? Get rid of assumptions and believe truth. Ask great questions that will challenge us. Instead of approaching a plan with assumptions, let's approach the process with prayer and curiosity. This allows us the freedom to set aside our assumptions and lean into what God is actually calling us to do. I think a great fundraising plan starts with prayer. It continues with prayer and adoration and ends with prayer and celebration. Now, I want to address the elephant in the room. COVID is most likely changing some of our fundraising plans, or has changed some of our plans. While last year's data is relevant, you need to be thinking about how are things going to be different because of COVID, not as an excuse, but how are things going to be different. And this is also not a way for us to stop fundraising. We can't say because of COVID, we can all let off the gas of fundraising. Don't do that. I know many ministries that have done that, and it's not good. They're losing out on a lot right now. But many of you have had to lessen what you have been doing because of COVID. I understand that. Maybe you've cut some programs, you've cut some staff, you're offering lower numbers in programs potentially. But just because your budget and fundraising plan might be lower does not mean you have failed. We need to avoid the what if thinking that only focuses on the doomsday picture. Instead, we need to consider the reality of what is coupled with the hopeful what if that leaves room for the Lord to move. We need to lean into what we're discerning from the Lord, coupled with the realities of what truly are. You still fundraise with trust in God's provision and his faithfulness. You fundraise with a mindset of what you want for your champions and not just from them. I want to reiterate that. That is something that I teach on and I talk about a lot. We fundraise because of what we want for our champions, not just what we want from them. Fundraising planning can be simple or it can be very complex. You simply need to pick what is right for you and what is right for your camp or conference center. Some of us simply, you take a half a day, you take some time to pray, you get a couple of cups of coffee, and you can create a fundraising plan with the steps I'm going to give you today. Many of you may take a 2-day retreat, involve your staff and involve your board, and during that 2-day retreat, do a fundraising plan. You can decide, but just make sure you're being very thorough and make sure the plan is very usable. Either way, the toolkit I'm going to share with you is adaptable and will give you a step-by-step process. Now, I love the show, Bear Grylls, the Man vs. Wild show. And there's an episode where he's out in the wilderness of Siberia. It's one of the harshest, coldest places on earth. He has no map, no landmarks to guide his path. He's walking through a very dense forest, can easily cause him to go in circles and never make it out. But of course, it's Bear Grylls, right? He's going to make it out. We know he's going to make it out. But he has survival tips. He always looks back. He's always watching his footsteps to make sure he's going straight and he's not going in circles. The other thing is he looks up, right? He lets the stars also guide him out. And the same is true for our fundraising plan. Without a fundraising map or a fundraising plan, we can easily fundraise in circles, right? So we want to make sure we're looking back to see what God has done. And let's celebrate those things. We also want to look up and listen to God for his leading. Also within the structure of your fundraising plan, because a lot of people hear fundraising plan structure, I don't like that, but within a plan, there is great freedom. There's freedom to say yes to the prompting of the Holy Spirit, freedom to adjust when you need to, freedom to be grateful and to celebrate more things, and there's freedom to rest when you know you've done enough. And there's freedom to enjoy and see fundraising as ministry and not as a necessary evil, which I hear a lot. There's also freedom from the tyranny of the urgent, freedom from competition, freedom from mission drift to do things that we're not designed to do just to make our budget. And there's freedom from a scarcity mindset that can lead to desperation or guilt-based fundraising, somehow hinting that our champions haven't done enough. Ephesians 4:1 says this, "Therefore I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God. You have each been called to your causes and your missions and your visions." And I would just want to encourage you, all of you on this call today, I want to encourage you, be true to that. Be true to the calling, be true to the mission and the vision that God has given you. Know who you are and what God is calling you to do. And I promise you, a plan will help you stay on track. So I'm going to go through these 7 steps of a fundraising plan. And again, I'm going to give you this toolkit at the end here, so you'll have it with you so you can actually walk through it yourself. But the first step actually calls us to look back at our mission and our vision. So step 1. Now, the goal here is a vision-driven fundraising plan. Now, in step 1 here, you'll see on the screen, you'll see a lot of empty boxes, right, pertaining to your mission and your vision. I'm in no way suggesting you reconsider your mission and vision. Basically, this is a place for us every year to come back to our mission and to come back to our vision and to address it. Is it still relevant? Is it still good? Is this God's direction and calling? Because our fundraising plans need to funnel through our mission and our vision. But I will ask you this. Do you know your mission? Do you know your mission statement? Does your staff know your mission? How about your board? How about your champions? Does your champions, your donors know your mission? Is your mission really long and hard to remember? Maybe you should consider changing it, if so, but you need something purposeful, short, clear, something everyone remembers, and that is helping change your corner of the world. That's huge. So part 1, mission and vision review. Make sure you're addressing a problem or a need and how you are solving it. Part 2 of step 1, create space for you to consider any necessary changes to your programs and the realities of your current economics. Again, we can go back, and the thing we all want to talk about is COVID, right? So really thinking through the necessary changes because of COVID, or if anything has happened in a year or different donors have stopped giving, others have started giving. This will create space for that. Asking ourselves, what do we need to stop doing, start doing, and continue to do? So step 1, review of mission and vision, recognizing that everything we do flows from right here. We also need to look at any changes, additions, and impact. Now, with every step I'm going to give you today, and this will also be in the toolkit, I give you Mission Increase has a ministry that we call Back to School Ministries that we use for examples. And so I'm going to show an example of a ministry that actually has put together each step of the plan. The first part, again, is the reiteration of the mission and vision. This information, again, is what they already had. This was what they pulled from their mission and vision, right? Maybe their case for support. Also, they didn't really need to rethink their mission or vision. Rather, it's just a reminder that this is the work they're doing. This is what God has called them to do. If you look at part 2 of this, they look at adjustments and changes that they are experiencing. You notice the first question, they say, what changes may be impacting your champions or the cause as a whole? And once you get this, you can read through those. But a few of those they're addressing are statewide restrictions with COVID have made them restructure partnering with schools. They had to move to a virtual format on their dinners. The government funding of their programs have reduced. And lastly, this is a tutoring ministry for after school, so they do all their tutoring online. Now, their changes also may have spending and fundraising implication. Again, your changes may have spending and fundraising implications. That's why it's important to address them. Those implications could mean a jump for us in fundraising, but it also might mean a decline as well. So mission, vision, what you're continuing, changing, and stopping. And as we move to step 2, and we're going to look at a true assessment of your camp and conference center and fundraising, which could be pretty difficult for some of us, right? I want to encourage you by saying this. What do you have in your hand? Again, this assessment we're getting ready to do could be really tough for you to look at, but might think you don't have much, right? You might think that we're way behind in fundraising or we're not doing a lot of fundraising. Don't get discouraged. In Exodus 4:2, God asked Moses, Moses, what do you have in your hand? And Moses replied, Lord, all I have is a staff. But what did God use that staff for? To perform miracles. Don't be afraid to be honest with where you're at and what you have. Moses said, all I have is a staff and a stutter. The widow in 2 Kings 4, all she said is, I just have a little bit of olive oil. And then the disciples in Matthew 14, who had to feed 5,000 people, they said, well, Lord, all we have is 5 loaves and 2 fishes. They were really truthful about what they had. But in their midst of the perceived lack, God created impact. So here's step 2. I'm going to walk through this pretty quickly because you can do this once you get the toolkit. After we have our mission and vision and changes set, we need to look at present day reality. How are we truly doing? Take the time to honestly assess what and how you're doing related to fundraising. It's basically just a gut check time. What is true of your overall fundraising work? You can also hand this assessment if you want to out to your board members. You can hand it out to staff members just to get other ideas and thoughts. So basically you're walking through all of this basically just in thought. How are we doing in each area? Now, the idea of this is we want to celebrate success and we want to start identifying some weaknesses. You will also see this is not only goes through income streams and assessing those, but also your fundraising activities, such as your face-to-face meetings with donors, your communications with donors. How about your stewardship? How are you doing with that? It also talks about events and on and on. We just want to be really honest. There's no judgment here, of course. Back to school ministry, step 2, they feel really good about their work in churches. They feel really good about their in-kind gifts, and they feel really good about their monthly giving program. Pretty adequate in communications, but they definitely need work in major givers, grant funding, and they need to look at their events. In their fundraising activity, there's a lot here, which is actually good for us to look at, but they feel like they're doing okay in tracking major gifts, but they need to improve in a lot of areas, face-to-face meetings, managing one-to-one relationships, direct communication with champions. Again, they're large-scale events. They talk about PEO, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, about what PEO is, and then staff commitment to fundraising. They really need to train their staff better, just have a better commitment to fundraising. The big idea with step 2 is this: take notes of where you can improve because it will come up in following steps. In addition to honestly identifying areas of weakness, I want to encourage you with a reminder that you have assets. You just may not see them as assets right now. So in doing your assessment work, ask God to reveal your assets and show you how to use them for His glory. Your organization has assets that go far beyond finances, right? Your assets could include your volunteers. It could include your facility. I mean, I've been to Dennis's camp, man. That lake is awesome, right? It's a beautiful place, and that's a great asset to them. Maybe your staff is an asset. Your stories of impact that you have are definitely an asset. And that list goes on and on and on. Just remember, as we move along, your numbers and your data are one voice in the plan within your toolkit that will speak to the process. But there is more to the plan than just dollars alone. Even Jesus, he had assets. We see here in Matthew, he had assets in the form of people spreading the good news of his coming and his work. Now, many times, as we know, those assets were pretty annoying, right? They followed him. He had to feed them. But this is how the good news of Jesus was spread, through good people who love Christ, and you have those people too. So as we move into talking about fundraising dollars and numbers in step 3, I want this to encourage you as well. It's possible for small budgets to generate significant impact, and it's possible for large budgets to generate little impact. Don't be fooled into thinking the size of budgets and impact are a direct function. All right, step 3, we're getting down the steps here. We must take our assessment, right, that we looked at in step 2 to the facts and data in step 3. This will help you evaluate where you've been and a plan of where you're going to go. The data is a strong voice and perspective on the strength of your income streams and fundraising activities you assessed in step 2. We have to anticipate the moment when we bring these two together, right? So we are either going to see some really good alignment, or maybe we're going to see some inconsistencies, or maybe we weren't really telling the truth in step 2, which is maybe what we find. Because we're going to take numbers in step 3 and look at it. We want numbers. So the first half of step 3, one-to-one, one-to-many relationships, we must put dollar amounts in there. You're going to see this, and you may look at this, all of these income streams that Mission Increase tracks, and you're going to say, we don't really track like that. And that's okay. A lot of times in this, we may have to take some very educated guesses, such as, for example, let's say you bring in all your donations in one lump sum donation bucket. Let's do our best to think about how much of that actually came from major donors. And I want to address that word for just a minute too. Many people always ask me, so what is a major donor? What is a major gift? And I always say the same thing over and over. It depends on the size of your camp. So for many of us, $100 a month or $1,200 a year could be a major gift to our camp, and that should be addressed as such. Many of us, if we're a larger camp and we get a lot of donations, maybe a 5, 10, 15, 20, 25,000. Some places I know a $100,000 gift is considered a major gift. So we want to look how many of that lump sum came from major gifts, how much of that came from events, how much of that came from our communications, etc. I also want to start encouraging you to start tracking in some of these areas, because diverse income streams are what we are looking for. And it is nice to know the data to educate our decisions and know where we're thriving and where we need to do better. In the second half of step 3, we also want numbers. So how many are in your database? How many face-to-face visits are you having each year? I want to say this about face-to-face visits too, because I just had a conversation with the guy on this right before I got on this call. He said, you mean I have to go sit down and talk to donors like face-to-face? And here's the reality. You have an 85% chance of securing a gift if you're face-to-face with them. When you go down to a phone call, Zoom call, that percentage goes way down. And when you go down to an email or direct mail piece, I'm telling you have a 2 to 5% chance. Face-to-face, how many face-to-face visits are you having? Again, track these things. It brings wisdom to our goals, as we'll see here in just a little bit. The bottom line is you can build a fundraising plan on whatever data you have, but you can actually build a better fundraising plan, of course, with the more data you have. If you find yourself saying we don't have that data, ask yourself next, how can you start tracking that data and doing it? Don't be dismayed if you have a lot of empty boxes representing things you don't have data for. No way, shape, or form does this mean you are failing in either way. Rather, we need to let it become an opportunity as a guide for areas you want to strategically grow in the following years. We're looking for growth areas because that's what we want to set goals around. Really quickly, back to school ministry, step 3. Step 3, if you'll recall back to step 2, they really wanted to improve in their major gifts, grants, and events income streams. So how did this appear when compared to their data? Their major gifts are actually around $190,000 a year, which could seem large for an organization their size. But what they're starting to see is that's becoming a smaller percentage of their budget. Also, if you jump down to individual giving stats, they have about 27 to 30 major givers, and they think this could really be an improvement for growth, not just in dollars, but just gaining more major donors and more people for the cause. Also, if you look at their event line, it's lower because they moved to a virtual event this year. Also, looking at the volunteer line, they have a lot of volunteers, but not many of them give. And if you guys have a lot of volunteers at your camp, I would say that's a great opportunity to be sharing with them about the mission and vision and what they can be a part of. Not just giving as today in the present, but maybe a legacy gift, a planned gift of some sort might be something to talk to them about as well. Back to School Ministries thinks that's a definite growth area. We also noticed in step 2 and 3, they left out a couple of things. They left out the estate and planned gift, and they left out the earned income. They left it blank. Number one, they don't feel like they have the bandwidth to do that right now, and they do not charge for their program. So unlike for us, we charge our campers, we have earned income. Back to School Ministries does not. So once you've gathered all your data and you've aligned the quantitative data with the activity, you can start setting goals, which is what we're going to do in step 4. But this concept from Henry Nouwen should be our guide. I'm a huge Henry Nouwen fan. Actually, I have his book right here. You should read it. A Spirituality of Fundraising, Henry Nouwen. Great book. If you never read it, it's about 30, 45-minute read. Your fundraising plan considers what you want for your champions, not just what you want from them. This is a great opportunity for us to seek the Lord, ask Him to reveal what He wants for our champions, and discern how we can work with Him to help achieve that. I really like this quote, and if you're not a process person like me, it can really help. The process of blooming is as valuable as the flower it produces. We must plan, and if we plan well, we will bloom. We can't fast track this and just get to producing the flower without good soil, water, sunlight, etc. We must be diligent in doing the work so our ministries will benefit. All right, let's move on to making goals. Step 4, we need to understand that fundraising goals are more than just automatic pre-programmed growth percentages like I talked about before. Goals need to be tied to your mission and vision and based on rationale, right? For example, our goals should come from steps 2 and 3, not that we should add 10% or 15% to our budget this year. Reality is we might be able to grow 30% this year if God wills in that, or we may need to go lower this year. But seeking God's direction is key in having confidence, whatever the numbers are. Step 4, when we look at goals, we must think strategically. So I want you to think back to steps 2 and 3 when we set our goals. Where were there disconnects between your assessment and your data? Where were there empty boxes that you realized with some focused work could become viable income streams? Were there some activities that needed work that could have impact on multiple income streams? Another important thing to consider when writing these, we must think about setting SMART goals. And maybe you've heard that before. SMART goals are basically goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. I'll hit those again. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and definitely timely. Strategic goals should take you from here to there by a certain date. So if you want to increase your monthly givers, we don't just say we want to increase our monthly givers. We say we will grow our monthly giving program from 20 monthly givers to 40 monthly givers by September. That's a great SMART goal. Also, know these goals do not all have to be accomplished by year end. All these dates don't have to be in cement. They can all be adjusted. But it helps to take these goals into action and making sure, I want to reiterate this, making sure we get our goals onto our calendar because we'll have a higher probability of accomplishing them. Remember, we want to identify 2, no more than 3 things that we can concentrate on this year that could really get us further down the road. So part 1 of step 4, we want to identify 2, no more than 3 focus areas for your camp or conference center in fundraising. Areas for focus and areas for improvement. Heck, one of your goals may be just to create a fundraising plan, right? That would be a great place to start. That could be one of your focus areas. Also in part 2 of step 4 on this tool, you'll notice we asking you to establish rationales for the growth area and creating the goal. A rationale is an explanation of why and how you believe this goal to be attainable and realistic. Maybe your goal is to start a monthly giving program like we just talked about. Your rationale might say that it's possible based on the giving history of our champions and the ability for us to monetize our mission, showing direct impact of monthly dollars given. And because we know monthly giving is more affordable for our families. I'll say a little bit about that too. If you do not have a monthly giving program, that may be something we need to jump on a call and talk about, because that is the way most of our millennials are giving. And if you don't know this, there's getting ready to be trillions of dollars transferred from boomers to millennials. So that's very important to know. All right, let's look at back to school ministries, how they are looking at these 2 to 3 things. Their areas of focus, like we talked about, are grant seeking, major gift development, and growing their volunteers by PEO. I said I'd talk about PEO. PEO basically stands for participant, engagement, and ownership. And I don't want to overwhelm you with a lot, because I would teach this in coaching. The idea is, how do we take our champions from just being participants, such as maybe they come out and volunteer once, maybe they come to an event and give a first-time gift, or maybe they come out for a retreat, or they send their kid to camp. That's very much just a participant level. How do we get them to engagement? Well, engagement might look like what we just talked about. Maybe they become a monthly giver, right? Automatically, that makes them more engaged. And then they become owners. And an owner is basically a person who's going to replicate themselves. They're bringing more donors to us. So the idea is from participant to engagement to ownership. So looking at goals and rationales behind them, for time's sake, I'm not going to read all these, but their number one rationale, just to look at grant seeking alone, they say that their current grant strategy is pretty random and unorganized. And with a more focused approach, they believe they can be more qualified to apply and receive grants. And their goal actually is they are going to apply for 1 grant a month and to obtain at least $20,000 in grant funding by the end of the year. Again, they're thinking SMART goals, right? All that, specific, attainable, realistic time, all that was in there. 1 grant a month to obtain $20,000 by the end of the year. Very specific goal, and they had rationale for it. We're going to get organized. We're going to get somebody on this to start doing it, which we'll see here in just a minute. And you can go on down and read the rationale for major gifts and volunteers when I send this to you. Remember, 2 to 3 SMART goals with rationale. The reason we're asking you to set only a few strategic goals, 2 to 3 goals, is because the fewer you put on there, the more likely you will be to accomplish those, right? So if we have 5, 6, 7 of these, there's no way we're going to accomplish all of them. Get very specific. Also, if you achieve your goals early or by mid-year, you don't have to wait for January 2022 to set more goals. Apply new goals and get back to work. The author here, Greg McAllen, he wrote the book Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. He said it this way: instead of trying to accomplish it all and all at once and then flaring out from there, the essentialist starts small, celebrates progress. Instead of going for the big, flashy wins that don't really matter, the essentialist pursues small, simple wins in the areas that are essential. So by setting a few strategic goals, you're prioritizing those things that are absolutely essential and those things that are going to be the best bang for your buck, right? Because we all have limited time. We're all really busy. So what's really going to help us? All right, step 5. After we get those 2 to 3 strategic goals, of course, those are going to have some financial goals with them. So any strategic goal we have, we're going to take now to financial setting, financial goals. Remember, we must question everything. So if you suggest some kind of increase in dollars, so if you want to work on your monthly giving program and right now you're bringing in $1,000 a month and automatically you say, we're going to bring in $25,000 a month in our monthly giving program, might be a little advantageous unless you have some really good rationale, right? And so if you have any increase in your dollars, we must always question why. Also, if you have any decrease, it's the same thing. Why do you think you're going to have the decrease? You could all have valid reasons for decreases or increases, but make sure they have realistic rationale and the goals, again, are SMART. The bottom line, we need a way behind every decrease or increase. And I would encourage you not to fall in the trap of blaming COVID for every reason for a decrease, right? Don't get lazy, but approach with discernment, honesty, and prayer as you set your financial goals. We must remember for faith-based nonprofits that fundraising goals are always discerned. There's a quote here from Ruth Haley. She says, discernment begins when we acknowledge the fact that we lack the wisdom we need, and that without divine intervention, the best we can do is stumble around in the dark. So knowing we've discerned direction from the Lord instills boldness, courage, and confidence. I'd ask you too to just invite your board, invite your staff, and to spend some time individually, corporately praying for God's direction on your fundraising goals and your financial goals. It's an important place to invite them into the process. This backside of step 5 basically contains 2 important narrative questions. For when we are developing our plan, we must consider these questions. These narratives can be very helpful for historical data. It also, if you have to present this plan to a board that has to get approval or someone externally like a foundation program manager, it will really help because they're probably going to ask these questions, such as, what gifts anomaly do we need to account for? Did anything that happened last year that won't happen this year? Maybe you guys received a big gift for a COVID relief fund that you're not going to get next year. Maybe your big event got canceled, but you're planning on doing that event again in 2021. Any anomalies that are going to happen? Also, are there any historical trends, such as I'm assuming for your camps, maybe you have a lot of church giving. Is that church giving going to stay, historical trend going to stay good? Make sure we're meeting with them. We know what's happening. Do we have any foundations that give to us regularly? And are they definitely going to be in for this next year? Our monthly giving programs. We just need to make sure that these historical givers are still with us. All these questions may be intuitive to you, but if not, I want to prompt you to practice thinking in this manner. What anomalies and any historical trends, always questioning those. So we look at step 5 for back to school ministries. We see that in the areas of churches, gifts in kind, monthly giving, they have really no projected increase into the next year. And by reading the rationale, we'll notice that these aren't incomes or thinking is going to have any projected growth. But let me say this, they are very well intended to maintain these and keep doing them well. So just because we set some new goals doesn't mean we stop doing other things well, right? We don't want our monthly giving to slip. We don't want our major gifts to slip because those are doing really well. So we want to have some maintenance things for those, and you can see that here. I want to look at the rationales for a few of these areas for them in 2021. So like in their major gifts area, they plan to grow 25,000 or 112%. And their rationale is they're going to use their O's. We just talked about PEO, their owners. They're going to equip 10 to 12 of their current major givers, their owners. Owners in the cause who share their experience with other potential, their sphere of influence, right? And they hope to gain an additional 10 to 20 new major donors in the range of 2,500 to 5,000 for the year. In their grants area, this is a huge jump. They're going to go from 5,000 to 20,000. If I was a board member on this board, I'd be asking why. And they give the rationale. They're going to commit a portion of a staff member's time to growing this income stream. You can also see their one-to-many rationale, including events, communication, monthly giving. Finally, they ask those 2 questions, so they're anomalies. And one of the things they've said is one of their major givers gave a significant gift in 2020 to help during COVID relief. That giver has told them they are not going to give in 2021, but plan to come back in 2022. Those are great things to know. And the only way you're going to know that is by knowing your donors, having a relationship with them. Also in their trends, their church giving is really solid, and they know that because they're communicating with them well. That's key. We must set goals based on good rationale, not a shot in the dark or throwing a dart and hoping it sticks somewhere. I want you to have a fundraising plan that serves you as a useful tool, one that's right sized for your ministry's season, that is designed for an appropriate incremental growth, and that works for you. I want you to envision for just a second your fundraising plan like your Maps app on your phone, right? You put in, I'm going to this destination, and while you're going there, all of a sudden it says reroute, construction ahead, right? That's what a fundraising plan can do. It helps you reroute, it helps you shift and pivot and give you multiple options for getting to where you want to go. So if changes are needed or things change mid-year, like 2020, right? In March last year, we were all hit with COVID. We had to adjust. Our fundraising plan can also be adaptable. Also, we need to talk about the difference between strategy and tactics. Right? The big idea is that a comprehensive plan connects our strategies with our tactics. Strategy describes the destination and how you're going to get there. We already have those 2 to 3 things, right, that we already set. Those are our strategic plan. Now we need to think about tactics described with our specific actions, and that's going to be in step 6. A solid strategy reflects the core values of the organization. A good tactic has a clear purpose that aids your strategy. We want to think strategically and act tactically. So let's say our goal is we have a very ambitious goal. We want to raise $1 million, right? And that's a big goal. And we will need multiple strategies to get there, things we want to focus on, and good tactics to arrive at the finish line. Some of our strategic goals will be a continuation of things supported by maintenance tactics, like we talked about with back to school. They didn't increase, but definitely going to keep those things going well. Other strategic goals are in the new income streams, and we'll need new tactics with increased and renewed focus. So how do we plan tactically? Well, because of COVID and so many other uncertainties, we can no longer create an annual fundraising plan and only revisit it 2 or 3 times a year. Planning and adapting the plan will more likely nowadays happen every month or every other month, 30 to 60-day increments. And this tool will help us live in our plan. This tool, step 6, merges your strategic fundraising goals and your financial goals. Your strategic fundraising goals are at the top of this document. Again, the 2 to 3 things you have chosen to emphasize. Your tactics or action steps in accomplishing those strategic goals will play out naturally in a financial goal and go directly into an income stream. You also want to include who is ultimately responsible for ensuring this step is accomplished, as well as anyone who will be responsible to participate in getting the tactic across the finish line. This is an important time to also include your team in the planning process or your board in the planning process. As you're filling out each tactic, make sure to include when you plan to start it and when you plan to finish it. And then also you'll see in the final 2 columns is a time for when you're reviewing your plan, is where you can make any adjustments, any notes that you make along the way. Once you've completed step 6, you want to make sure you sit down with your calendar, and jot down any of the singular and recurring tactics that have specific dates tied to them. Also put on your calendar the dates you will review the plan. Again, we're thinking every month or every 2 months. The idea is it must be reviewed consistently to make sure we stay on track. Now, similar to the strategic fundraising goals we talked through on the previous slide, you will be setting tactics or action steps for each of the goals you made in step 5 for each income stream. As you're detailing your tactics, make sure they're realistic and they are achievable. The plan becomes a tool that shapes your work, that informs your calendar, influences how you should spend your time and who you should be spending your time with, right? So as an executive director, if you're the only one at your camp, that's very important. And I have people ask me all the time, Scott, how should I be spending my time? And we got to think strategically about that. More frequent review will create a deeper sense of gratitude and dependence on God's provision as well. Now, let me say this also, if your accounting software allows you to consider including your projected fundraising dollars in each income stream, that way you can pull any budget versus actual reports you need and see how you're progressing through your fundraising goals. The idea is putting a fundraising goal in your accounting software that can help us see where we're heading and how we're doing. If you want a new result, you have to have new tactics. Without this process, it's likely that many organizations would say, we can't raise any more money than last year. The fundraising plan is really a way of breaking it down to tell you you really can. Really quickly going through Back to School Ministries, step 6. Their first goal is to apply for $1,000 a month to obtain at least $20,000 in grant funding by the end of the year. We already read that. And again, they're looking at tactics here. They already talked about, they're going to give a person's time to do this, but they're also going to research and purchase a subscription to a grading database. They're going to dedicate that 20% of a development coordinator's time. They're going to attend, they have a meet the funders in their area. You may have that in your area that you may not know of. A lot of these foundations get together and have a meet the funders meeting. They might invite you in to share about your organization. And then they're also going to create a grant seeking calendar, really researching, making sure they know each one they're applying for each month. In each of these tactical lines, they noted who is ultimately accountable for this action. Who is the one that making sure this activity gets done? And they noted the action team that will also carry it out to completion. They have start and finish dates. And at the top of the sheet, you'll always see a date. So every time you review it, make sure you change that date, the last time it was reviewed. There's also a progress and adjustment area to take notes when you meet. You can easily, when I send this to you, you're going to easily read through the goal, rationale, and who's responsible to make sure it crosses the finish line. You can also see how your strategic goals and tactics do move into financial or income goals and tactics as well. So as you scroll down in the financial goals, tactic, timelines, and review process, the 2 goals reviewed on the previous slide have direct carryover into financial goals, and those are shown in the yellow. In the areas where they'll be maintaining, such as churches, gifts in kind, monthly givers, you will see fewer tactics. Now, let me say this about that. Even though they aren't trying any new tactics in 2021 in these areas, it's important to list them. Let's say something were to happen to the development person or the executive director, or this person was to leave the job. Listing these goals and tactics will help the ministry continue on without a pause. All right, step 7, we're getting there. Once we have our goals and tactics, we must make sure we're reviewing them with the right people, the right data, and frequent enough to stay on course. Step 7 is where you leverage all your planning work, like your map app, like we just talked about. Set a plan. It's looking for detours, roadblocks, unforeseen issues. Rerouting a plan will happen in the review process. Make sure you're reviewing it often with the right people and the right reports. Again, who's accountable for the plan? Who's the team that's accountable for the plan? And also, who's going to keep the team and the board accountable? Who's going to be the owner of the red flag saying, hey, guys, we're getting off track here. You need that person as well. Also, you need to figure out what reports the team needs to evaluate success and ensure that you're staying on track. Of course, you can look at obvious financial reports for that, but is there any other reports you need, such as donor segmentation? Are you segmenting any of your donors for different asks or different appeals? Also consider other non-financial reports that have implication on your finances, such as your communication plan or your strategic plan. Back to School Ministries example, they've determined the following as far as the review process. Their development director will be the one leading the implementation and the review process, but also the team will review this document every quarter. If changes need to be made to the plan, they've noted the review team recommends them the changes, and it's approved by the executive director. I want to say this just about a word for if you're at a small camp with a small staff. You might consider using some of your board members and maybe a few other people that are just maybe great champions to start a development committee to help in this process. This idea can be very helpful, and I know many camps are using this structure. In fact, I use this at New Life Ranch. Had a group of development team members, a few board members, a financial advisor, a couple of financial advisors, and a couple of our key donors were a part of our development committee that helped create these plans. In fact, I've been working recently with a camp in Texas. Last week, I did coaching with just their development committee. The director wasn't even on the call. their development committee are starting a monthly giving program, and that committee is the one that's owning it. I'm also, my wife teaches at a private school my daughter goes to here. We have a development committee that I'm helping them with a plan right now as well, and only one of their board members is on that committee. So don't get caught up in the excuses of why you can't make this type of plan happen. Remember what's in your hand and let God use it. A plan is only as good as its options. This plan is not set in stone. You have room to ebb and flow as you need to. And because you and your team will be evaluating at regular intervals, you can catch opportunities to reroute early so you can make sure you end up at your destination. I love this quote that I got from retired boxer Mike Tyson. If anybody remembers Mike Tyson, he's kind of a crazy person, I know. But he made this quote many years ago. He said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face." Right? And that's going to happen, right? That's most likely going to happen to us. Get up, get an ice pack, make adjustments, and move forward. If you're doing this assessment regularly, you will not just notice what still needs to be done or where there is lack, but you will also notice what you're doing right, how you are winning, and then things you can also celebrate. You're going to see God's provision and his abundance. Earlier, we said God's provision includes people and process, not just profit. None of this is possible without God's provision and the generosity of our champions. All this planning also needs to be tethered to transformational giving principles. So Mission Increase actually has 10 transformational giving principles. And I use principle 5 a lot in every one of my workshops because I think it's really important. And I just want to say, we as leaders, we have a dual responsibility. We have a dual responsibility to steward the mission and grow the people God brings us. Regular reflection of our fundraising plan creates a heart of gratitude for God's provision and appreciation for the people he's allowed you to steward along the way. Growing the people God brings is not limited to your champions, though. It also includes the people you lead. How do you lead up with this plan? How do you lead down with this plan? These solutions on a fundraising plan might seem really obvious to you, but unless you're helping your board understand it, they won't get it. And unless you're helping those that you lead underneath you get it, they won't get it. We have to bring them in on part of the process. Influence up so that you can be sure your plan can be endorsed from the top down. But we want to make sure we do this in humility. Plan with a heart of humility, valuing the interests of others above your own. Lead up, lead across, lead down. Get everyone on the same page so you won't be like my in-laws. I didn't say that on vacation, right? It was my in-laws that didn't plan well, sorry. But don't be like us on vacation, right? Execute the plan so your camp and conference center impacts lives. One organization said this with Mission Increase, working with Mission Increase to develop a fundraising plan was like helping them get all their ducks in a row. So having a plan, including a budget, can make grant seeking more approachable. It can be a stabilizing mechanism, making sure the team is all on board, just like we talked about. Everyone has an assignment, they know what to do. It also reveals areas of growth, impact, and organizational health like you've never seen before. It also can bring more clarity to your board and bring more clarity to your champions because you'll know what you're spending. You'll know the impact it is making and how you're raising those funds. So next steps, I would just really encourage you, as soon as we stop sharing here, I'm going to put those toolkits in the chat. Make sure I do that first so you'll have the tools. Also, gather the data you need, set the goals, create tactics and timelines, establish a review process, and continue to use the plan. Because without a plan, you can simply get lost. You'll not see the faithfulness of God, and you will not reach your ministry's full potential. Have a plan and use it. I would be glad to review that plan if you'd like. Specifically, if you are a 3CA member, for sure I can help you. If you're not a 3CA member, don't tell anybody. I'll help you. But yeah, we'd love to help you become 3CA members if not. This is all really good stuff. It is a step-by-step way to make sure you have a plan and a way forward. Here's my contact information. My email is shaw@ccca.org. If you have any other questions, like to jump on a call to talk about this further, I'd be glad to do that with you. I just want to encourage you, don't get overwhelmed by the material. Take it piece by piece, and also get help from your board and your team. And I can help you as well. It's not meant to be confusing or make you overwhelmed. Small steps to get you where you need to be. Dennison, others, thank you guys for this opportunity. Honored that I'd have the chance to speak to all of you today. And I pray nothing but growth and impact for each one of you in your camps and conference centers. So let's move on into a time of questions. And
Yeah, sure. You know, I don't know that people have had a chance to type questions in because they've been taking notes and drinking from the fire hose. Um, and I know some people have hopped on here right at the end, so we may get a couple questions as we go. But I've heard you use the term scarcity mindset and abundance mindset. Would you mind talking about what that is, what those two terms mean?
Yes, sir. Let me share in the chat real fast. There you go. There's the workbook, the toolkit, and the PowerPoint slides. You guys get on that. Yeah, so the whole idea of a scarcity mindset is this. If we have a feeling that there's one big pot of money out there that is available to everybody, right? And that somehow, shape, or form, I've got to go get my piece of the pie before the other camp or conference center does, that's a scarcity mentality. There is enough money to go around for God to do everything he's called us to do in every single one of our ministries. So that is huge. Did that not go through?
Yeah, I think it has not quite made the jump into the internet space.
Let's try again.
Sounds good. We'll keep an eye on that.
Here we go.
Oh, there comes something. Okay, so the workbook, there's a toolkit, and then the PowerPoint slides.
Yep. Yeah, and so let me finish what I was talking about there. So the whole idea is God is good, God is generous, God has enough money to support everything that he's called his people to do. That is not a question. And that is a theology of abundance, right? All of those things. The theology or the mindset of scarcity is, number one, maybe my donors don't have enough to do what we need to do. So we blame our donors, which is huge. It's a no-no. We don't do that. Another theology of scarcity is like, well, there's just a certain amount of money available out there, and I've got to go get my piece of the pie. And that's another scarcity mentality. That's huge.
Cool. You want to talk us through the workbook as a separate thing from what we've seen, or is that just the empty templates from what we've seen today?
The workbook was just basically the slides with some empty notes place. The toolkit is actually the 7 steps along with the back to school ministry example. I'm sorry I didn't send that out before. I should have, but one of my fears is I do that and you'll just take that and just leave and we won't have a conversation. And so I wanted to do it at the end. And then the PowerPoint slides actually too, I'm giving you a little, and if you go to the notes section, you'll actually see everything that I went through as well. So I'm not trying to hide anything or anything like that. So you'll be able to see the notes as well. But the toolkit is a great resource. I'll say right now, I'm working with 3 camps right now to go through a fundraising plan. One of those camps is pretty large. The other 2 are pretty small. And I'll say this, even the large camp, they're really struggling because they've never taken these assessments before. And it's been pretty difficult. And then the smaller camps are actually doing pretty well as far as really knowing that they know their donors well, they know what they can do. And they're really, for them, I'm just saying 2 things, not 3. We're just going to really work on 2 things because most of those, one camp just executive director, it's it. The other camp has a maintenance person. And so I'm really helping them get really focused on what's the best bang for your buck on that situation.
Makes sense. It seems to me that the most important part of this entire process is just sitting down and starting and working through that process. And then once we have, there were several categories of money out there, major gifts, monthly giving, all those things. Once we've gone through and created this plan, which of those items do you think, if we've not done something before, is the place to focus our effort? Do we go after the major gifts, go loaded for bear, or do we go after the squirrels, or what do we do?
Yeah, so I think one of the things you got to think about is generosity begets generosity. And so the idea is, how can we be successful? And so one of the things I always say is, all of you guys on this call right now have fans of your camp. You do. And a great way to get those fans giving is to start a monthly giving program. So that's a great way to, number one, add to your donor base. And then also you're getting, so, I mean, how would we feel if we didn't start the month at zero, right? I mean, if every month you knew 1,500, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, 20,000 was coming into your budget, we would feel a little bit more relief on that. So I would say a monthly giving program is really, really good to start. And also, if you're not running any kind of events, people think about galas and stuff like that, and you get exhausted just saying the word. And I understand that. The other side of that is I'm getting ready to teach actually this quarter, at the end of this month, I'm teaching on micro events. And maybe that's something you never heard of before, but you think about these owners of our organization. What if you had 5 owners? And let's say those 5 owners were willing to invite 5 other couples. So now we've got 12 people, 5 of them, the 2, and then the couple, to their home for what we would call a micro event. And that owner shares their story of your camp, their giving, their history. Maybe they received Christ at your camp. Maybe they've been giving for a long time. They've seen direct impact. Maybe you also sit around and eat s'mores, because apparently that's all we do at camp. That's what people think. You give them a fire pit and you give them s'mores, and you give all of them a camper impact story from last summer. And we read those stories. Every family reads a story. And then maybe that owner says, hey, we'd really like to invite you guys to partner with us in helping this camp. And so we're putting up a $5,000 match tonight. So if you guys can match 5,000, we'll have $10,000. And let's say 5 couples did that. Well, that's huge. It's 50 grand, So the whole idea of micro events is another great way. People always say to me all the time, so what's the best way to build your donor base? And I always say, equip the donors you have. That's the best way, because they're the ones that carry the story. They're the ones that go influence their friends to give to your organization.
Like a great advice. Thank you. And like I mentioned, I think just sitting down and doing this is the challenge. Can you maybe just give us permission to take that half day off, or to plan that 2-day retreat to talk about it with our staff? Absolutely. What are some ideas that you've seen? I think I feel guilty sometimes if I take off a day to go do something like that. Can you give us that permission and maybe give us some ideas of what some other people have done to make that happen?
Yeah, so I think the first step is just make sure your board is on the right page with this. I think a great step, I mentioned this book, the Henry Nouwen book, A Spirituality of Fundraising. I'm actually right now, I'm meeting with, 2 different camp boards right now. So a camp in Alabama, we'll do our last session on it. It's 2 sessions I do with camp boards just on that book, and it changes their whole perspective on the whole idea of what I was talking to you guys about. Fundraising is asking what you want for your champions, not from your champions. That's a whole different mindset of giving. That giving would actually be good. That Henry Nouwen says, first and foremost, fundraising is ministry. He says that ministry is just as important as a Bible time, a singing time, a prayer time, all that. And so he really tries to change and flip the switch as far as our thoughts on fundraising. And so that's a great place to start, is just to say, hey, what do you think about fundraising? So this board I met with last week, that was the first question I asked them. I want all your feelings about fundraising. And what did I hear? Necessary evil, something we have to do. I hate asking people for money. And then I flipped the question. I said, how many of you guys give to organizations or to give to people or missionaries? And they all raised their hand. I said, tell me a story about when you've given a gift, what's happened. And I heard story after story after story. And I said, the same thing is true when people give to your organization. So stop apologizing for it. Don't apologize for asking people to partner in the gospel. Philippians 1, Paul says, thank you for partnering with us in the gospel. Thank you for jumping on board. We are partners in the gospel with this. And it just starts, something starts changing our heads. And just the guy I was talking to before I got on the call, he said, I don't ask people for money. And I said, well, you're gonna have to change. The idea, so you don't want anybody to come in and partner with you. That is so selfish. Man, I think about the people my wife and I support, how selfish it would be of them not to allow us to partner with them in the gospel. That is huge for us. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think that starts with the board, and then Dennison asking that, okay, well, this is going to take some time, and maybe asking are there a few board members that might get really excited about it? Hey, come out for a weekend. Let's walk through this. And I'd love to do that with you.
Sure.
Especially you, Dennis. You're closer.
That's true. It's a short drive. Hey, someone's got a question. I mean, I think we're all over the place on what our next step would be, but somebody has a question about grants, and they just want to know, do you have any recommendations on where you would search for grants for our camps?
Yeah. Number one, I want to say this about grants. They are not a magic pill. It's kind of like me. I diet all the time. I wish there was a magic pill I could take and just lose weight. That'd be awesome. Doesn't happen. Exercise and hard work and eating right. It's the same way with fundraising. We think, well, there's these foundations out there that give away a lot of money. That's our magic pill. That's how we'll get our money. Reality is, what I always tell people is usually foundations are about 10 to 15% of your overall budget. And so you got to think of it that way. So not to spoil anything, but just to be honest in reality. The second thing is, how do you start researching? Well, there's a few places. There's a website called Candid. It used to be called GuideStar, but I think it switched to Candid. And so Candid is a place that's free. You can do a free account. You can actually do searches in your area of foundations. Your public library will also have a section on private foundations and public foundations. And then there's actually paid subscriptions as well. So at New Life, we used one called Instrumental, except it didn't have the A on the end. It was just TL, not TAL or whatever. Instrumental, TEL, TL. It was just TL. Instrumental. You actually could put in different, like we could put in our annual fund, we could put in our campaigns we were doing. It would actually spit out campaign or people that we would potentially ask. And actually, we could even keep notes on that Instrumental with an account too. That it is a subscription, so it did cost. I can't remember. I want to say it was somewhere around $350 a month to do that. But that's another way to get grants as well. Google, just Google, foundations in Northwest Arkansas, foundations in Missouri, wherever you're located.
Sure. Okay, that's some good basic direction. Are there other resources you would suggest just for fundraising or development in general? I know you've shared some at the 3CA section.
Yeah.
Any that coming to mind?
Yeah. So the Nowlin book's a great book to read. Also, there's a book called Coach Your Champions. That is a book that Mission Increase really recommends. Coach Your Champions. It will go through that whole PEO framework that is so good. So that is a great resource. And then, of course, being a Mission Increase account holder. And so what I'll say, if you're not a 3CA member, I unfortunately can't really help you on our workshops, but you can go to MIF.org, Mission Increase Foundation, MIF.org, and see if there might be an area director in your area. They are all located. So we've got, I think there's 21 locations now, geographical locations. Orange County is one, Atlanta, Dallas, North Texas. There's 2 in Ohio, Michigan. We've kind of got area directors like myself all over for geographical locations. So if you have a geographical location that you're close to, a big city, you might have a Mission Increase director there that could really help you. They'll probably send you to me, and I'll probably talk to you about 3CA, which would be great. Somebody asked about 3CA. Who is the 3CA Canadian rep? There is CCI International as well. That you could be a part of as too if you're not in the United States.
Cool. We had a question come in. A lot of us in our denominational camping system wear a lot of hats. We're probably more on the smaller camp. Even our biggest camps are kind of small camps in the 3CA world. And fundraising takes a back seat, moves to the back burner to other more pressing needs. It'd be great to have a dedicated development staff in our camps. Obviously, hiring someone into a role for development and fundraising is a big upfront expense and doesn't have a return right away. From your experience, do development specific positions generally pay off? And how can we best advocate on our boards to our VPs of finance to consider spending money on a development position?
Yeah, that's a great question. How do I answer that? Are development people worth it? I think I am. I was for New Life. I would say increasingly always raised a whole lot more than I made. That was for sure. And so yeah, the right person, I think. But you just can't think too. So let's say you haven't done a lot of fundraising, right? And we're always looking for that magic pill. We hire a development person to come in. It's so a major gift. So when you think about a major gift, I want you guys to think of this way. It could take 12 months to 18 months to receive a major gift after creating a relationship with that person, because they're building trust with the person and all that. So I've seen a lot of people. In fact, there's a camp here, and I won't say their name, but local section, that they continually go through development people because they bring them in for a year and they haven't done any fundraising. And all of a sudden this person's not raising any money. And I'm like, you got to give them at least 18 months to 24 months. Well, we can't do that. Well, so I'd say yes, the right person, and we're always thinking, well, we got to go find the slickest development person and Reality is no, we don't. So one of our major donors at New Life Ranch for years kept telling our executive director, you need to hire an in-house person that knows your camp better than anybody, who knows the stories. And we kept hiring these guys that were development people, and they had no camp experience. Whatever. We went through 3 of them in the matter of 7 years, 3 development directors, until they hired me. And again, I'm not tooting my own horn or anything like that, but I had 20 plus years of relationships of being in programming. And so I knew all these people. I knew the parents, I knew the retreat groups, the churches, and so forth. And we found a lot of success. So that donor laughingly said, about time you listened to what I said. So I would say find somebody who knows your camp really well, has a story that can share that story, because it's not about being a used car salesman. Nobody wants that. What they want is somebody to come share the stories of success, and will you partner with us to make this happen? And so that's a big thing. The other thing I would say too is, just as you are executive director, smaller camp, it can be pretty daunting. But again, I think it goes back to what you said, Dennison, of really asking for that time. So I encourage our executive directors who I work with 90% of the people I work with are executive directors. And I always tell them this: you need to meet with at least 2 to 3 champions a week. And that sounds daunting, and that sounds really hard. And when I mean meet with them, what I would say is face-to-face if you can. But if not, a really good phone call or a really good text exchange is really, really important. So the whole idea of creating your list of those major donors that we know we need to get face-to-face with, and even if you're by yourself, and so asking your board permission to say, do I have permission to meet with 2 to 3 major donors a week? So you're meeting with at least 8 to 10, 12 major donors a week. You're trying to hit all of them at least once a quarter. That's the idea of these bite-sized chunks. I've raised millions of dollars with a piece of paper with some really nice pictures on it and what we're doing. And I was able to raise millions of dollars. They're not people, these donors aren't looking for any slick presentation. What they're looking for is people who are real, who are meeting real needs, and they're making real impact. And that's who they want to give to. So just having those conversations, 2 to 3 a week, I think is doable. I was a director for a little while too in Colorado. I get it. I had a really small staff. Yet I had to delegate, and I had to tell my board that this is important and I've got to be doing this. And they said yes. And so they let me do it.
Well, Scott, this has been super rich. This has been it hasn't really been a ton of discussion, but like we use the term drinking from the fire hose, and it has been awesome. There's just, we're going to run over in our time, but the guy who's my boss on this call just dropped a question in the chat, and he would like to know how important are camp staff alumni in the development of the fundraising process.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I'm working with the camp right now in their monthly giving program, and we're really segmenting our donor list to start with our alumni, because what we can do with a monthly giving program is we could say, if you sign up for a monthly giving program in this first year, you're actually a founding member of, so New Life Ranch, where I just work, they've created a monthly giving program called Ranch Hands. And so their monthly giving program are just the Ranch Hands. That's what they're calling it. And everybody who signs up in the first year is a founding member. And so it's a great way. These people already know us. They've probably either received Christ or led kids to Christ at our camps. They cut their teeth there. These are great people to get on board, 10, 25, 50, 100, $150 a month. And so that's a very big part. What I talked about, a development committee, that could be a great opportunity for our staff alumni as well to jump on something like that. So they feel a part of something. And so people, most people don't want to just give. They want to be a part of something. And so that gives them an opportunity to get their hands and feet wet. And then also we're providing for those people as well, maybe having a thing at our camp, an overnight type work weekend or something like that, where we actually launch the monthly giving program or share our story about launching something like that. So absolutely, if we can keep the hard thing is we all know, right? So they come work for us and then they kind of fall off the beaten path and then they start having kids, and so maybe they come back. One thing I tried to do, just to let you guys know, is I was always in front of our summer staff every year telling them about all the projects we were doing in case a parent asked during the summer. So they knew who I was. They knew who to introduce anybody in their cabin asking to. And then at the end of the summer, I challenged all of our summer staff to send a kid to camp next summer, $25 a month. And we would generally have 4 to 5 to 6 sign up every year that they could do 25 a month. And then when they graduated from college and they were making more money than they ever knew what to do with, I actually went and tried to visit them. And so I would go, have dinner with them, update me what's going on and say, hey, part of this is I want to ask you to start giving. And a lot of them did. A lot of them became really major donors. I mean, we had one guy that started giving. He was in my cabin years ago. And he got really big into real estate in Dallas, and he became a major, major donor for New Life Ranch. And just because of the relationship I carried with him was sending no kids to camp. They weren't old enough. He was giving. And then all of a sudden they started coming to family camp, and now his kids come to camp. So it's pretty cool.
That's pretty sweet. Hey, we're at 4:30 almost, and I was going to ask you to just depress us all here for a minute. I know a special story that happened in New Life Ranch, and they acquired a new camp called Frontier Cove, and just depress us with where we're not at and where New Life Ranch is. Maybe take 30 seconds, just tell the story, because I know it's just a God thing where he stepped in and did some cool stuff.
Okay, if I have to.
It's okay. It's okay really to brag a little bit, but
it really is. It really is a God story, and it just didn't happen. I mean, it came from years of relationship building. So we were in the middle of our largest campaign ever in New Life Ranch history, 7.2 million. We were trying to finish that, and we were waitlisting about 12,000 camper days a year. So we really felt like we were missing out on a potential generation of campers that we were saying no to. And so we always had this idea. We had 1,000 acres. We were going to build our own camp. And the more and more we got to looking at it, it was going to be about 22, 25 million plus how many years it was going to take to raise that much money and build it. We saw in the news that Camp Dry Gulch, which was an hour just west of us, close to Tulsa, between Tulsa and where we were, was coming up for sale. We knew of the camp. Immediately, all the directors jumped on the phone. Did you guys hear about this? Selling. So we were there the week after. It went up for sale. $16.5 million purchase. And we started talking to a few donors. It just didn't seem like it was going to happen. We continued the process for 2 years, continued to talk to them, continued to ask them what it would take. And they basically came and said, the lowest we would take is $10 million. So I went to a family and asked them if they would consider a $5 million gift to do half. And they said no, that they would do 3.5, but we'd have to get the camp for $7 million. And I knew that wasn't going to happen, but we went back and asked. So I went back to that family and they said, well, if anything changes, let us know, but we're out at this point. In that time, I didn't know God was working on the heart of a sibling, brother-sister couple, family from our camp. He called me and he said, hey, I know what just happened with that family. I'll tell you what, I'll do 3 million and my sister will do 2 million and we'll get you to halfway. And which was crazy. So I went back to that family and I just said, hey, I just want to update you. This is what God's doing. And he called me back 2 days later and said, we'll go ahead and give that 3.5 million if you can get the last 1.5 million, and we'll finish it, make sure it gets finished. And yeah, God knows, we had a family that continued to give about $10,000 a year that we knew had capacity. Come to find out, I'll try to keep this all in order. Come to find out that family knew the $3.5 million family. So I connected those two, and that family gave the last 1.5 million to complete the purchase debt free. And so God is good, has nothing to do with me other than building relationships with those families. I just talked to the one that gave $3.5 million. I just talked to him on Friday, and he was dreaming about his daughter wanting to start a camp and wanting to know if I'd help her. And so I still have a relationship with him, which is great, even though I'm not there. And it's just good. It's a God-sized story. That's really cool.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of this is all based on just building relationships.
That's it.
Scott, again, this has just been phenomenal. And I thank you for spending your time here with us this afternoon. And just thank you so much for being here with us.
Absolutely.